Trigger warning! This film contains suicide attempts, and so too does my description of the film. Avoid both if you are uncomfortable with that sort of thing. Franklyn is a British film starring a sad boy, Rorschach from Watchmen, and a suicidal artist. When I think about British cinema, I tend to think of this sort of morose, mopey drama with parents clashing, a university or young adult setting, a sort of pseudo-artistic flair, and a sad main character being a sort of mid-20s or so man. And that's one of the main characters in this film, a sad man who was left at the altar and is now seeing his childhood imaginary friend as a real person again. There is also a man who is wandering around a fantasy world full of Victorian-era police, with religions everywhere, and a young woman who kills herself to make her student films. This film is evenly divided between them all. The lead woman repeatedly attempts suicide in this film, calling the paramedics first so that they can save her life, and filming the entire thing as they save her life so that she can use it for her student film in what I can only describe as the most disturbing thing I've ever seen on film. Or at least, like, thematically so. She hates the rich mother she has that pays for her education and belittles her and blames her for how messed up she is and mocks her every turn and imitates her accent. And her art professor is, of course, horrified to have black and white footage of her lying in a bathtub with slit wrists. Meanwhile, there's the dude Franklyn, who is exploring a fun version of London in a pseudo-steampunk style with big coats and big hats and scary policemen that are here to ensure everyone has a religion. Because everyone in the city must have a religion, something you believe, but Franklyn believes in nothing, and nothing will stop him from escaping the police and tracking down whoever's behind the crime thing he's in. It's a sort of noir thriller, but in a quasi-religious setting. It's the most imaginative part of this film, and it's what everyone will remember if they've heard of it or seen it. Meanwhile, of course, the sad and mopey man is doing nothing interesting in this film. I ignored and or slept through most of his scenes, I think. There was probably something poignant about true love in there, but really I wasn't following it that well, and by the end of it he's found a chance at love with the lead woman, so that's great and all, but he's the weak link of the main cast. He's got the least happening to him, and you need to balance these sort of things, or you just sort of stop caring about what happens to this sad-looking young British man, and you wait for him to stop moaning and wander off screen so you can go back to the suicidal woman and her family problems and the gloomy aesthetic of her scenes, rather than the depressing and mundane middle-class neighbourhood scenes of our male lead. And of course, a lot of this film is also spent going, when do I get to see Franklyn again? Because of course we're going to be more interested in that spooky-looking man in the silly mask who narrates everything like he's that detective character in a trench coat in Watchmen. I'm not saying that they're the same character, but there's a lot of comparison to be made between one neo-noir character in a trench coat wearing a white and black mask who is wanted by the police, and another, even if they're both borrowing from the exact same aesthetic roots in the comic book detectives of the 30s and 40s with their gruff narration voices and such. Franklyn the character story is a fun and mildly imaginative romp through a fantastical version of the modern world, wrapped up in the religious and historical elements that modern-day London is wrapped in. The world he is in isn't a different one to that of the main characters. It's just the same world through a different lens that casts Franklyn as the one sane man amidst everyone else, and the one faithless man in a world where everyone else seemingly has something they believe in. He is religiously distant, and his vision of London is one where the church stylings of architecture are repeated over and over and over again, and there's a church or something on every street corner. And anyone who has seen this film could probably tell you that his name isn't Franklyn, but I have to try and continue to call him Franklyn because I can't actually remember his name. I can't actually remember the name of the woman that tries to kill herself in this film, and I completely fail to recall the fourth point of view character in this film, having gone back and read a summary online and gone, wait, there was a fourth character in this, because while I can recall a lot of the film, the characters are not the parts that really stand out to me. The glum palette and the grey skies, the fantastical version of religious London, and that usual sort of everyone comes together in one scene ending, where all the disparate threads of the plot begin to blend into one, they're things that I can vaguely recollect. But Franklyn the film is something that I don't quite remember the plot of, and a cursory peek at other people's recollections of the film indicates that that's a bit of a recurring thing. So is Franklyn worth your time? Probably. It is a very slick and a very artistic film that feels like it will have been largely forgotten and thrown to bargain bins and pre-owned DVD stores rather than ever remembered. Like, this film desperately needs more people to look at it. It is silly and moody, but that was the late 2000s for you. People love this aesthetic, and I remember being entertained by Franklyn. It's a silly but fun film, albeit a silly but fun film that looks at PTSD, suicidal thoughts, mopey adulthood, these very glum experiences that are all frightfully common to Londoners, specifically white London. Like, this film has one non-white face on screen, as far as I can recall, and while actor Art Malik is of Middle Eastern complexion, this film manages to light him such that he is almost frighteningly indistinguishable from that one bad guy in the first Guy Ritchie, Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes movie. Like, yeah, this is a very white London, and it's very middle class as well. I mean, that's the disparate threads of the main characters. But of course, you have Franklyn as the one outsider among them. But yeah. And of course, there's the whole suicide thing, which is great and all, and it's very artistic and certainly helps it as part of the film. But, that's a bit of a problematic thing in the film that it's even being, well, I mean, the way that it's being discussed and shown, I found, like, it makes sense as art and it makes sense in the film and it makes sense narratively and I know what they want to do with it, but I can't think of it as anything else than, hey, I'm killing myself for my art, literally.